Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Peace and love, everybody. I'm Brother Ali. This is the Travelers Podcast. Thank you for being here. This is a very special episode because we're celebrating 100 episodes of this podcast over the course of the last just a little over 2 years. And we'll get to that in a minute, but I want to start by saying Ramadan Mubarak to everybody. That's the people that are observing Ramadan. And even if you're not, this is a blessed time, and we really pray that you also share in the blessing of this time. And, it's a particularly difficult Ramadan because of what's happening around the world in so many places, in the Congo and in Sudan and in Chicago and, all over the world, and particularly in Palestine and Palestine. It's a very challenging time. This podcast has been sponsored from day one by the Zakat Foundation, and there are people in Egypt on the border to Palestine that are working day and night with the Zakat Foundation, loading trucks. They've made all of the agreements, they're making all of the arrangements, and right now they're working day and night to get food into Palestine, into Rafah, into Gaza, and they're, working sincerely and tirelessly. I made a post the other day that got a lot of engagement, as they call it, on social media. A lot of people really happy to see that message. A lot of people really happy to help. For $5 on Zakat Foundation, they're able to provide a meal to somebody in Gaza. So we're talking about kids and moms and dads and friends and uncles and teachers and doctors and people, human beings living life in Gaza. And, I got a bunch of responses of people saying, like, how do you know it's going to get there? And how do you. And the reality is that this is a situation that's extremely difficult, but I am a person that I've known the people at Zakat Foundation for several years now. It was a beautiful thing to be working with them already when the earthquakes hit here in Turkey, and also in Syria. Because of the fact that the Zakat Foundation has a big hub here, the executive director is Turkish, and so they were able to jump in right away. So as much of a tragedy as that was about a year ago, for those huge earthquakes to just devastate this part of the world, the fact that we were tied in with people that I could personally say, I know the people that are going to be distributing, these resources. I'm in communication with the people who are talking to the folks on the ground, their partners on the ground. And the same is true now with the Zakat Foundation, with what's happening in Palestine. And so, there are not a lot of guarantees, but there are people that are working, and they have been able to get trucks into Gaza. They have been able to deliver stuff. And so I would like for the people that are within the sound of my voice in this podcast, on my social media, the people that follow us, we're trying to raise 5,000 meals just from our little tribe, our little corner of the internet, our little community, this movement that we have going on here. There are half a million people, 500,000 accounts follow me on social media. But that thing is a maze. I mean, trying to actually access those accounts is really crazy. It's one of the many ways that creatives are just being robbed through in this modern situation that we find ourselves in. And every single thing that comes along, they say, like, this is going to be the thing that's going to open it up and finally make it fair. Social media, you'll be able to go directly to the people that want to, see you and interact with you. You can engage with them directly. And it's like, yeah, okay. But 500,000 of them follow me, and when I post something, I get 2,000 responses, 2,000 people. Oh, unless I pay you, or unless I work within your, algorithmic choices to make your robots like me and move me to the top of the list, or to even just show a small fraction of the people that said that they wanted to follow me, So I just say all that to say, I would love for us to send 5,000 meals in the direction of Gaza, with the sincere desire, with people who have connections, with people who are on the ground, with people who are taking that stuff, these hygiene kits, and and putting it on trucks with the intention of getting it into Gaza. So if you don't want to be part of something like that, that's your business. But I really do. And I know that there are a lot of people that listen to this that we want to do whatever we can. So I've been podcasting about Palestine, praying for Palestine, petitioning and protesting and speaking. And, I've had some consequences for doing that. I'm going to keep doing all of that, but I'm really grateful to be connected to the People of Zakat Foundation. And none of that money is going to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, that money is going directly to people that are putting supplies on trucks and making every attempt and every effort to deliver that. And they have had success doing it. It's not just a pipe dream. Like, they actually have delivered large truckloads of stuff to people in Gaza and in Palestine. And they do that all over the world. They got there's you go to Zakat Foundation. So Zakat Foundation, Zakat US on social media, zakat.org. Go see the work that they do. They build wells all over the world. There's an orphan program that's really dope. They have work all over the world. It's a Muslim organization, but they don't only help Muslims. And, not everybody in Palestine is Muslim. There are Arab Christians, just like there were Arab Jewish people, all living and sharing Palestine before the British gave it to some other Europeans. Before some Europeans gave it to some other Europeans, Palestine was a place where all of the world's religions did live together, and they were all practiced. All three of these religions were being practiced. Their holy sites are next to each other. They did live with peace. This isn't a religious war. It's just not. This is an ideological, capitalist, colonialist, white supremacist project. And it's been that way since before the Holocaust, and to say that that's anti-Semitic, to talk about this particular political reality, is a disrespect to what actual anti-Semitism really is. Because anti-Semitism is and has been a very, very real problem for the lives of human beings. And that problem comes from white supremacy. That's a European problem. Anti-Semitism is a European problem. It's not a Muslim problem. It's not a Middle Eastern problem. It's a European problem. And so what's happening there is that there are people that are loading trucks and making every arrangement possible and making every detail possible to get trucks into Palestine. And so go to Zakat Foundation on social media. There's a link on my stories. Every day I'm posting about this. And so you can there's a certain link that you can hit to let them know that we sent you. But that's not the most important part. The most important part is that we send as much as we possibly can on its way to Gaza, on its way to the people that are starving, just so that human beings can eat food. I don't understand what there is to debate about that. Yes, there are also other people that need food, and that's fine. But these are human beings that need food. And so we are about trying to send them food and hygiene kits. So you can check that out. They've sponsored the podcast from day one. This episode is really special for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that this is a project with me and BK1, Travelers Media. We started a company, for those that are asking. We have a new album coming out. Love and Service is my new album. It's my new official album that comes out April 26th. And we've released 2 songs, 2 videos, animated, these like really beautifully animated kind of vignettes. The producer of the project is a really beautiful friend of mine. We became really dear friends creating this music together. He also is an animator, illustrator. So the person that made all the beats also is doing an entire film that goes along with this album. And the album is pre-ordering now on brotherali.com. And so people have been like, hey, is this an official album? How come this isn't on Rhymesayers? So for those that don't know, I, for the last several years, have not been doing my business at Rhymesayers. We started our own platform. I had certain needs that I wanted. I had a certain way that I wanted to move forward. And so we launched our own project. And since then, Slug and Ant have been on the podcast, and Sa Rock has been on the podcast. And actually, this new album that we're dropping, Aesop Rock is on the new album, from Rhymesayers. And so still beautiful working relationships, still beautiful friendships and musical collaborations and things. But I just am no longer releasing my newer music on the label that I used to. So the label now, or the platform that we've built, is Travelers Media with me and BK1. So there's 2 episodes with BK1 where he and I talk through our history, his work in radio and media justice, his work as a producer. Really incredible story, incredible human beings, one of my dearest friends, definitely one of my most important collaborators. I would say him and Ant are my 2 most important collaborators and probably best friends, which is a really beautiful thing. And so when I was ready to start this podcast and start this platform, BK was just coming out of a commitment that he had made. And this is after helping launch my career 20 years ago. Me and BK toured together for 10 years. And so if you saw any of those early shows, BK1 was the DJ. Now he's the editor and the producer of the podcast. He is the project manager of the Love and Service album that's coming out. Rock Marciano is on this album. It's one of my favorite things that I've ever done. It really represents a really very, very pivotal moment in my life that I was able to, along with Unjust, the producer, express myself in this way that just feels so real and organic and true and sincere. It also represents the building of a bond of brotherhood and friendship between me and Unjust that didn't really even know each other. And this is a lot of our healing and our coping with the major changes in life in the last few years. It wasn't easy. It was very difficult stuff. And there's songs that I've been wanting to write for years that finally came out on Just Music, on Unjust Production, the beats that he sent me. And he's making these, animated videos for every one of the songs. So also, the Love and Service album is pre-ordering now on brotherali.com, or you can go to brotheralistore.com. They both go to the same place. And you can get a pre-order copy of this album. The pictures don't do it justice. Like the photos on the website don't do it justice. We're waiting to get it back from the manufacturer so we can take like real photos. But the presentation of this thing is beautiful. And the fact that the person that did the album, produced the album, also is making all of the visuals. He also did the packaging. And so it's all of my lyrics. There's, art that he did, like the art that he created. It's a 32-page full-size book with pages that feel like an almanac, like these kind of like really kind of textured pages. Really, really beautiful presentation. The record itself. It's just been a really beautiful experience, and I'm really grateful for it. So let's jump into this episode. We just passed the 100 episode mark. This is me and BK1 reflecting on the journey of what the Travelers Podcast has been like for us. Much love. Thank you for being here. Here we are, 2 years and 100 episodes after starting this particular journey. So I figure I'll just kind of give a little bit of background. I've always wanted to have a podcast ever since I found out they exist. And me and you actually talked about doing a radio thing back in the day.
Yes, we did.
We have like whole outlines of basically like audio documentaries that we were going to do.
Yeah.
We were going to do one about the iconic theater in Chicago. You know what I'm saying? Like the Chicago version of the Apollo Theater.
Mm-hmm.
We had a whole one on Sly and the Family Stone that we were going to do. Like we were about to go in.
I put hours into the introductory music for that one. There's this whole like 3-minute cut and paste thing that brings in clips of documentaries and stems and all these instrumentals and stuff. We took it very seriously, and there's outlines for at least 5 or 6 different episodes.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that was like definitely the precursor for this, because obviously we met through you doing radio.
Mm-hmm.
And then after you left the road, then you dedicated a decade of your life to community, anti-racist neighborhood radio.
Mm-hmm.
And So, I had always wanted to do a podcast, especially since I really love the Combat Jack show in particular. Like
Yes.
Reggie Osei and the Combat Jack show was like, and very specifically, the episode that made me want to do this was D Nice talking to Reggie Osei on the Combat Jack show.
Hmm.
Because we always knew D Nice and we love him, and it's really dope seeing him have this like second career as the DJ for the Obama family and all that kind of stuff. And like for some reason, like he's DJing on helicopters and just all kind of crazy fly stuff. Um, but Reggie got him in there, and D Nice opened up and told the whole story about Scott LaRock getting killed, and talked about his relationship with KRS-One and how he kind of, if I'm remembering it correctly, I think he kind of felt like KRS blamed him for that. Like basically, Scott LaRock got killed mediating a dispute that D Nice just kind of inadvertently got in,
Yeah.
and talked about his long relationship and how he always looked up to KRS like a father figure, but KRS never really gave him the validation that he was seeking. And then after all of those years, like they came back and they had dinner, and KRS was like, "Man, I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you." And just like D Nice, who seems like such a beautiful, sweet, sincere person, cried and told these stories. And it's like, man, where else would you ever hear this? This
Right.
is something that absolutely needs to exist. And there's just something about the fact that somebody cared enough to ask him. Like somebody sat down with him and was like, "So what's up with you, man? Like, what's it been like for you?" You know?
Yeah.
Um, like that. I'm like, I want to do that because I've had that moment with so many people and those kinds of moments, even with people that are well known. Like I know that I know stuff about them, so I started thinking about, what Freeway had been through, what Immortal Technique is like in real life, what Vinny Paz is like in real life, like all of these people that have this like persona. But I'm like, man, if I just wish I could show people what these people, the way I view these people. And
Right.
in a lot of ways, that's what my music is like too.
Yes.
Like for me, it's like I wish people could see me the way I see myself. That's like the initial thing. But then when I talk about other people, or like when I talk about like my experience with like Black culture or Muslims or hip hop or whatever, I'm like, man, maybe I could show the listeners the way what I've experienced with these people.
I mean, generally speaking, you've got a whole career built around that, but very specifically, you've got an album that it's my understanding that was the intent behind the album.
Yeah, the Us album.
That's right.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, because the Undisputed Truth was so autobiographical. And people were like, "That's my story, man." And like, "What? You're an albino Muslim single dad?" You know what I mean? Like, just finally made a rap career happen, and you know what I mean? And I realized like, oh, it has nothing to do with that. And then I started thinking like, oh, I wonder if I could stretch that. So if people could see themselves in me, could they see themselves in the people that I care about? So that's a lot of what that album was. Try to see themselves in Ethan and my wife and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so then going through the whole process of, coming to Istanbul, wanting to start managing my own career, not really knowing what the next steps were, I reached out to you on some like, hey, do you want to do this podcast together? And it very quickly blossomed into like, hey, do you just want to like do our whole professional thing together? You want to do our whole thing together again?
That's right.
And like, yeah, and so here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah. And it feels like we're just getting started. Like it's 2 years ago, but it still feels like the beginning. I still feel like it's not even really off the ground yet, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a moment that's ripe with that feeling as we're rolling out the first real album, film, like the first big project on Travelers Media. In a lot of
Yeah.
ways, it feels like we've been laying the tracks for this for the last
Yeah.
2 years, and now we're at launch,
Yeah. And I hate the fact that the podcast is suffering because of the fact that it's just us fueling everything. Like all the words have to come from me. And all the organization and presentation of those words has to come from you. So like if there's a bunch of rap words, I gotta, you know what I mean? Like I gotta be so focused on that booking the podcast and you editing episodes and me doing the art and copy and you posting and it's just like, man, the stuff that we've been putting into getting this album out has really made the podcast suffer. And that I don't like that, but I also, I understand that this is what it's like when you have a really small kind of team.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of our relationship with listeners and the people who email us regularly and the Caravan members, I completely feel you because, we've made a commitment to them, and right now it's taxing. But at the same time, there's also something really beautiful and energizing to me about the fact that everything that we put out into the world has like your thumbprint and my thumbprint on it.
Yes.
There's something about being a two-man team, especially all these years later with the full circle nature of our business relationship. There's something about it being you and me against the world again. That's
Yes.
pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's dope. It's great, man. It's the greatest thing ever. Do you listen to, like, when I do solo episodes that you don't have to like produce or anything, do you listen to them?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, okay. All right. I never know. You know what I mean?
Finally,
But there was
break
one,
from this
like
guy.
a couple, you know what I mean? I wouldn't feel any kind of way if you're like, nah, man, I listen to Talib Kweli those weeks, man. I can't do it with everything.
No. I listen to them mostly when I'm washing the dishes. That's one of my jobs in our household. I do all the dishes, and everybody in the house knows that when I get into dishes mode, my wireless earbuds go in, and I'm listening to podcasts. And if there's a new one that I didn't have anything to do with, the solo ones, that's when I'm listening to those. What's funny though that podcast listeners probably don't know is that the people in your life get a lot of voice notes from you. Like that's your main means of like casual day-to-day communication is leaving voice notes. And some of them are very lengthy and autobiographical, and some of them, at least in our relationship, and I imagine in a lot of other relationships in your life, are you sort of thinking things through and talking things out and getting things off your chest. And so, and so it's always, there's always a little bit of a funny experience for me when I'm listening to the podcast, like solo episodes of the podcast, because it sounds so similar to just my daily correspondence with you.
Man, like me and my Sheikh, Dr. Omar, I mean, I've just got days of messages between us. Like like my spiritual development happens on voice notes. So it makes sense, that like, doing the solo episode is like, and do you remember back in the day when we first started BrotherAli.com, like during the Us album, I used to do live streams where like people would come on live stream and I would talk for like 2.5 hours. And what's a trip is that Sage Francis would be there for all of them and listening and commenting and just being like, yo, nobody's doing it. Like Sage is one of the biggest supporters, especially of the podcast. But he's a supporter in general. And Sage is, out of all the underground rappers, like, it's funny, it took him a minute to say something about Palestine. And I saw people start to come at him. And I was like, no, you just give my man Sage a minute. You know what I'm saying? He's processing, and watch when he's educating himself. He's, man. And then suddenly he was just like, like, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, he went all the way in, and it's been relentless. That's pretty beautiful.
Yeah. And then there was a picture of him and Saul Williams for Saul's birthday.
Mm-hmm. I saw that.
He posted a picture of him and Saul, and I'm like, of course these guys are friends. It was really beautiful. And I could just imagine the two of them.
Well, I would imagine
like,
that they met through the, like in the slam poetry days. That's always been my estimation of that friendship.
Yeah. I was just kind of like, man, if me and Amir Suleiman could ever put out our like late night conversations, that would be probably like, there would probably be, neither one of us would have any more career or people in our lives. So it's like that level of like, but yeah, it just made me think about like seeing those two. I'm like, man, I can only imagine what kicking it with them late at night must be. It's dope. But yeah, I used to do live streams and I would just talk for hours. and you know, people would ask questions and things like that. But yeah, that was when the site was called Livestream. So yeah, I've always wanted to do this, and it's, you know,
Well,
so it's super.
and then, you know, I remember that in the like Tamir Rice, Jamar Clark, you know, that couple of years, you did something similar on YouTube, didn't you?
Yeah, on IG Live. Yeah, during the
Oh, on IG Live. Okay.
yeah, and those are still out. Like I kept them.
hmm
You know, that was like during the uprising.
Uh, I thought that there was something that predated that.
Oh yeah, no, I did something. I did, like, people would come and, like, when I was doing organizing stuff. Yeah, I would do like videos like talking about the organizing stuff I was doing.
But like long form, right? And very, I mean, if memory serves me correctly, they had kind of a podcast feel to them where it was sort of
Something like
long
that.
form, just sort of talking things out, thinking things through, explaining things in broad context. Am I making this up?
No, yeah, there was some stuff like that. It never really like took off, but yeah.
hmm
Yeah, I did some of that in that time too. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's really important, I think, for people to, in general, like people that have something to offer, to have these different ways to share. And another thing too is like I feel like on the podcast it gives me space to open up about things that not everybody that listens to my music wants to hear about. You know what I mean? Like there's a place to put certain things and certain, you know. And I'm still a little more careful than I wish I was. Like there, you know what I mean? Like I'm still like, man, the main one like that is the Surviving Cancel Culture episode.
hmm
Sage hit me up and was like, "You talked for like 2 hours, and I don't feel like you ever got to the point. Like I was waiting for like, okay, but what is the takeaway? What's the point?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "You're still being careful." I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. That's true."
Yeah. Well, I feel like you'll have another shot at that when this new album comes out. I feel like this album sort of opens that door for you if you want to go back in, and because I think you have a really interesting perspective on that. I agree with his assessment.
Yeah. I felt that way too when it came out, that I was like, man, I talked about this, but I didn't. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting like when I like look at the early episodes, like I was in a very formal kind of I was being very formal in the beginning. Like it took a minute to figure out the voice, and I feel like I'm still learning it. But like when I look at the Ilhan episode and the like those early episodes, there's a lot of like formality there that
Hmm.
it was just kind of like being careful, you know what I mean? Like definitely wanted to honor the person, honor the moment, you know what I mean? And was still figuring out what's my way in here.
Well, the Ilhan one to me, you know, that came early. That was maybe what, our fourth or fifth episode,
Yeah.
and that was a really important one to me because Ilhan is somebody. She's one of these figures where there's so much red meat to dig into if you choose to. There's so
Mhm.
much tea. There's so many ways you could set her up to be explosive. There's so many ways that you could utilize her to purposely be polarizing in a way that algorithms are going to explode over and get us lots of views from. She's somebody who would be easy to set up lots of little clips, you know, to be able to use
Yeah.
in promoting the podcast. But that's not the direction that you went in that conversation at all.
Right.
That conversation is so centered around her being a human being
Yes.
and the very human experience that she's had,
Yeah.
a member of a family, a refugee, somebody who's seen horrible things,
Yeah.
up through the political experience, but it's not a political episode.
Right.
And to me, in a lot of ways, that conversation was a statement of purpose for the Travelers podcast.
Wow, yeah. No, that's really true. It's really true. And it's ill because like I remember her from organizing, but she clearly doesn't remember me. Like she was like, "Yeah, I've never met him before." And I was like, "What?" But she didn't know that she was meeting Brother Ali. She was just
Hmm.
we were at the same stuff and like, you know what I mean? Like I know that I've like gotten her coffee before and I've you know what I mean? Like I know that there's stuff that we've done together, but she didn't make that connection of like that's a rapper
Hmm.
guy. Like I was just a person at the organizing thing. But I've always like seen her as an amazing human being. And so that was the thing that I really wanted to focus on because I think that so many people don't see her in that capacity. Even Muslims like don't really know what her experience with the religion has been. You know what I mean? The fact that she does have religious training. Like I feel like Muslims kind of feel like, well, she's just this politician lady because she's aligned with stuff that a lot of the Muslim community feels weird about.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of people don't realize that she did have a certain level of religious training and that she went through her own, journey with her like spiritual self. And then also all the lessons that like you take policy out of it, take talking points out of it. Like this is a person who like one day everything was cool in society and the next day everything like it was a straight up civil war.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's even just posting her photograph though. I lost a lot of followers on all platforms just for posting a photograph of her.
Hmm.
And every time we repost something, I just prepare to watch the little dip on my like analytic dashboard. Like people will stop following just for seeing her face.
Yeah.
It's a trip, man. But yeah, that we just and then people either like dissing her or being argumentative or coming at me in the comments. Like all of those things, like if we let those things rock, I know that those posts will skyrocket.
Hmm.
Like if we did that thing where we're polarizing and provocative and argumentative and topical in that way, you know what I mean? Although we would be rewarded for that. You know what I mean? Exponentially so. Like I think that our podcast would be much bigger if we even allowed those conversations to happen around it. But like, man, I hide those comments and I delete those comments. Not because I'm trying to infringe on somebody's free speech or whatever, but just like, man, we're not here for that. That's not what this is. There's so many places on the internet where you can argue.
Yeah.
And I don't mind what people say about me. It's just when my supporters start going at them in the comments, I'm like, nope, we're not doing that argument thing here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been like just focusing on the humanity of whoever we're talking to. Um, yeah, it's not rewarded the same. It doesn't hit the same in the competition for algorithm.
Yeah, and frankly, in terms of the sort of standard practices and tools that you use to push a podcast up the charts, having real human conversations doesn't make for as many like juicy clips and
Right.
thumbnails and
Yeah. And I mean it's crazy because podcasting, like when you used to say the word podcasting, you were talking about, some of those earlier ones where it was like long form conversations, there was no video. A lot of times it was people that knew each other. It was just really there wasn't as much like when I think about like if I think about like Combat Jack, like what are the moments that they would be like if I compare that to the big hip hop podcast now, it's just not even the same art form almost. Like what they're doing is almost completely different. And the intention is almost completely different.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I say the closest to it in the hip hop space, and we've talked about this all the time, but man, what Kweli does on his podcast is like, especially when they were in their like original format, there's times lately where he's just kicking it with people and it's not quite the same. But when they were in their original format, like, and I know that Gil Noble is a big inspiration for him. But like when he was doing his like journalist thing, where he would sit down with an artist and be like, I am gonna give you a retrospective of this artist's career and let them comment on every part of it so you see it through their lens. Like that really kind of like academic approach. Super dope. But most of what hip hop podcasting is now is just not interesting to me at all. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's I'm not into it, man. It's kind of sad, to be honest. Like I have a hard time listening to a lot of podcasts with people that are interesting, and just the idea of trying to like compete in that kind of space. It's just like we just have to. It has to not be a competition.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be like, man, we're doing our thing, and we're not here to compete with any of these other podcasts. We're not comparing our numbers to theirs. I remember at some point when we got to like the 1,500 mark. You know what I mean? We're 50. We could depend. All right, we got 1,500 people listening to us, which I mean, compared to Drink Champs or Joe Budden or My Expert Opinion, Math Hoffa, or like any of the big hip hop podcasts, is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, we were like, man, we used to do all that stuff that we did to try to sell out. All the touring was just like, man, can we sell out First Ave? And First Ave used to be 1,100. They renovated it. Now it's 1,500. So it's like, yo, we're selling out First Ave every week.
Yeah.
And it's people that just want to hear what we're thinking about and who we're talking to. And so like, man, that's not small. Like that's significant, you know?
Yeah. And those 1,500 people listen incredibly loyally, regardless of who the guest is. You know, every now and then when a certain type of guest gets on, we'll see the numbers explode for 1 week. But that sold out First Ave crowd shows up every week, and they show up right away, right? To stick with the metaphor, they show up right when doors open, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like, man, and it's really dope, man. It's really a beautiful thing. Yeah, so the ones that really spike is when we have a well-known underground independent hip hop artist. Like those are the ones where so Immortal Technique, Slug. I mean, obviously, so the biggest episodes have been Slug, Cornel West, I think in that order.
Mm-hmm.
Vinny Paz, Immortal Technique, Ari the Rugged Man is high on there. Is high. The Merce episodes, there's 2 Merce episodes. Yep. Those both did really well. Like whenever we have, you know, people from our kind of our musical world, like that, those always do really well immediately. And man, the episode that made me feel like this is why we do this, you know what I mean? There were 2 of them to me. The first is Vinny Paz.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah, and when people are like, man, what's your favorite episode? Vinny Paz. And it's a trip because, you know, me and him for a long time avoided each other. And he was the one that was the bigger person with the bigger heart that, you know, really like reached out to me. And he did it in the most beautiful way. And that conversation, like, I just feel like he opened up so much. And like I'm just so grateful for that, for him doing that, you know. And
what's the other one?
Kenny Parker.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So Kenny Parker is the person who I didn't know before. Well, no. There's a couple of these. I was about to say he's the person that I didn't know, but I was able to like talk to him about his story. So he wrote this really beautiful book about the way that they grew up.
His brother, KRS-One.
And DJ Kenny Parker, younger brother of KRS-One. Who was his DJ for a while, wrote a book about his life and by extension KRS-One's life, their childhood. And so he sent me the book and he actually asked me if he could come on the podcast. And he introduced himself like I might not know who he is. And I'm like, man, you're tripping. So that conversation, I felt like, because I've seen other people like interview him, and I just feel like we connected in a way that I don't know if other people did when they interviewed him about the story. But I would say the person that I didn't know prior, and we just like the second we started talking, I I always say his name wrong. Kiese Lehman.
Kiese Lehman. Yeah.
But like the second we started talking was like, oh my God, did we just become best friends? Do you want to do karate in the garage? You know what I'm saying? Like the second we started talking, and I'm like, man, I'm a huge fan of yours. I can't believe, and he's like, I can't believe that because I'm a huge fan of yours. Man, that was like talking to an old friend. That was like talking to Amir Suleiman or something.
Yeah.
That was great.
That's an example of an episode that falls into a category of guests that I'm extremely excited about, conversations that I thought were really beautiful and really excited to share, and then just very little engagement from listeners.
Yeah.
You know, there's a pocket of these 100 episodes that are some of my very favorite ones that have the lowest numbers of listenership.
Yeah, it's usually Black women.
Black women make up the majority of it. Yeah.
Like the guests.
Mm-hmm.
So like Tony Blackman's episode, one of my favorite episodes. Like if somebody really loves hip hop, if you say you really love hip hop and you're connecting with it on a spiritual level, on a healing level, on a human level, on a, you know, there's a otherworldly thing happening with hip hop, that episode. And I mean, also we talk about what it is to like live outside of America. That episode is incredible.
Yeah.
And
the conversation with Adrienne Marie Brown.
Adrienne Marie Brown is another one.
Mumu Fresh. Mystic.
Mumu Fresh. Yeah. I mean, the Sao Rock one did well because people know her music.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, dude, yeah, the jewels that Mystic dropped were like,
oof.
Dude, when Mystic said, we got to stop giving our trauma away to other people for them to monetize, and like, dude, I was just like, damn it. Why? You know what I mean? Yeah. And I mean, yeah, Zainab Ismail, you know, who went from, so she's somebody that the other thing is, and this just really highlights this. Culturally, I'm not quite the same as my listeners.
Mm-hmm.
That's just been a thing from the very beginning. The people that listen to me are not the people that I grew up with. You know what I mean? We look alike. There's obviously some attraction in there that those are the people who have always. So I can fight my way in the like traditional kind of hip hop space. Like if I fight for it, I will be accepted. You know what I mean? People will be like, oh, okay. But then on the side of, you know, I would say mostly white listeners who may have been like a little newer to hip hop and it just feels like these people, like we're looking for or waiting to feel welcomed by somebody that looked like them. And so, you know, but that's not the way that I grew up. And that's not how my sensitivities and sensibilities were set up. That's not what my relationships are. That's not what my, you know. And so it's been a really good thing, especially when, you know, on the Sevens Travels tour, Shaka came and got me. It was like, hey, they just wrote in this magazine that you're Black. And what are you doing? What are you going to do about this? I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. And he's like, well, you need to know. You need to figure it out. I'm like, yeah, it's just weird for me because blah, blah, blah. He's like, I already know. You act like I don't know you. But there's a way, there's a purpose for all of this. And that's the purpose that you need to start living. It's like, these are obviously people that really care. Like they care about you. They care about what you're saying. You now, because of all this life that you've lived, you now have the ability to translate certain things that you know, through experience. You're able to translate these things. And he almost predicted the whole thing. He's like, not everybody's going to rock with you, but the ones that do will be sincere. And you know what's ill is that, what's crazy is that, and I even say it's ill because of him. It's ill because, but certain people came along and certain like white listeners came along and took what I was saying very seriously, like Chris Jeffords. Mm-hmm. Shaka actually befriended him. Like Shaka and Chris Jeffords know each other. Mm. And in my mind, I see that as an extension of, Chris is dope. And and he genuinely loves Shaka. So it's that, but I feel like it's also Shaka being supportive of that aspect of what I do. You know what I mean? Mm. But all that being said, there's still a lot of times where it just doesn't connect the way that I wish it did. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, man, these people are incredible. And hopefully maybe us talking about it on this episode will maybe make people think. Because I mean, people don't necessarily realize. I don't think anybody is like, yuck,
Yeah.
black woman, no.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just like life is busy. There's a lot of competing stuff. I don't think anybody that's rocking with us, I would imagine, is not making intentional, conscious decisions like that. But it's like, you know, like you said, like there's only a little bit of dish doing time where I'm listening to podcasts and okay, what's going on my different podcasts? Like, okay, whatever. Duncan Trussell has this person, you know, Math Hoffa has this person, Questlove and Fonte have this person, Brother Ali's got somebody I never heard of.
Right.
You know what I mean? I might catch him on the next one.
Yeah.
But it's super corny to see that trend. It's really, really whack to see that. It hurts my feelings to see that trend. Like I'm just like, man, there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah. You know, hearing you talk about your relationship, your evolving relationship with the people who show up to listen and support you reminds me of the Merce episodes, because that's one of the things that you and him got into, in part because some of your evolution, you just touched on a really important role that Shaka, I Self Divine, played in that. But Merce on tour also played a role in helping you to understand cultural differences. And that's a segment in your conversations with him that really stood out to me and was just really fun to listen to.
Yeah.
You know, so many of these episodes are with people that you share a history with.
Mm-hmm.
And on the one hand, it just positions you to be able to ask questions and open up doors and start conversations with them that nobody else is going to, because nobody else has that shared experience. But it's also just fun when it leads to opportunities to hear about how people that you have, you know, in some cases like 20-year relationships with, how you, the two of you, have grown and changed, and the experiences that you've had together. I think that's always fun for listeners and for me.
Yeah. Man, Merce is doing a completely solo podcast called The Greatest Rapper in LA, which is the most Merce title. But man, I listen to it religiously. Like it's funny because I'm his number one listen to podcast and he's mine.
Mm.
And Merce just came with his mom and like they came to Istanbul and it was so dope. But it's weird, man, because like I didn't until just recently. Like I've always known Merce as one of my most important friends, but I never realized what a teacher he's been to me. I knew it on the God Loves Ugly tour. I knew that for sure. But really over the years, a lot of things that he's embodied. And, you know, I remember talking to somebody one time that we were talking about the influence of me and Slug on this particular artist. And he's like, well, you inspire me, but I don't like Slug. And I'm like, well, if I inspire you, then Slug inspires you. Because Slug informed me, you know what I mean? And a lot of the leadership and mentorship and stuff that Slug has done, even though he doesn't like to categorize it like that, just inspiration, I would say. A lot of it actually came from Merce. A lot of it is actually really inspired by Merce. I think that might be his most important friend. I think Merce might be, I mean, aside from Anthony and, you know what I mean? But I really think that Merce might be his most important friend. And so Merce, even when me and Merce aren't talking all the time, the fact that me and Slug are, I think Merce is also inspiring and informing a lot of the ways that Slug does things. Yeah. And it's a trip that me and Merce, we still send each other voice notes and stuff, but we keep up with each other via each other's podcast.
That's really
and
funny.
The same with Blueprint too. it's really beautiful to be able to sit here 2 years in and 100 episodes in with BK1 and just talk about what this very, very organic journey has been like for us. It just really means a lot, and we're very grateful that you're here for it. In a lot of ways, the podcast and the learning series that we've done online, some of the releases where we've just kind of dipped our toes in here and there, all of this stuff has been about us building a platform where we can offer this holistic message and music and movement and intention and connection so that we can offer it all to you and offer it to the world in a more holistic, complete, full way. So it's a major milestone to get to 100 episodes of the podcast, but also the fact that we have this album. This is our first full length, like full album release that we've done on our own platform. Love and Service. Aesop Rock is on it. Rock Marciano is on it. Casual from Hieroglyphics is on it. Quelle Chris is on it. And there are songs on this project that were absolutely necessary for me to write. There's certain songs that come along that, like, this song has to exist. You know, Forrest Whitaker is one of them. Uncle Sam Goddamn is one of them. Own Light is one of them. Baby Girl is one of those songs. You know, that song had to exist. Puppy Love had to exist. Picket Fence had to exist. Chain Link had to exist. There are certain songs that have lived in me for my whole life. The title track of this album, Love and Service, and when I write these songs and finally let them go, it's like, oh, there's another one, Out of Here, about the suicide of my father and grandfather. There's certain songs that, like, these are major themes in my life, and I'm doing myself, my body of work, and my audience a disservice if there's not a song about this, but it has to be right. It has to feel like what I feel about this subject. I have to say the definitive, this is the statement about what I feel. This is what it's like to be in my heart with regard to this subject and this experience. So the title track for this project is called Love and Service, and that's one of those songs. We just released another one of them called Cadillac, about a story that I've told on this podcast before. And, you know, these are very, very important songs for my heart and my life and my family and my friends and my community and my career and the message and the movement and, like, you know. So I'm very grateful to still be inspired. Like, I still feel inspired after all these years. You know what I mean? I'm not putting out music because it's never been about making money, especially the releasing the album part. You know what I'm saying? There's just never a guarantee that we'll even make our money back, because it costs a lot of money to do this stuff well and to tell the people at the record manufacturing plant, like, no, we want the highest quality everything. When people hold this in their hand, we want it to feel like what it felt like to make this music. We want it to, the packaging and the housing that this stuff lives in, to feel like what this means to us. We want you to feel that in every aspect of it. And we want the vinyl to sound like, you know, I had this record mixed really twice because I had a specific sound that me and Just were going for, you know. So I just say all that to say, this new album, Love and Service, means a lot. And if you're listening to this, if you're part of the caravan, if you've been part of this journey, this is a celebration for you too, because of the fact that you have played a role. Even if you just like and share and subscribe and all that kind of stuff, you played a role in helping this thing come to be. So go to brotherali.com or brotheralistore.com. The album is pre-sale right now. And I just really appreciate you. I'm so grateful to still care the way that I do, to still get immersed in, to get lost in a song, to get lost in the creation, to live in the world of an album while we're making it. Not all the people that I started with still have that type of inspiration. Not all of them still have that fire. And I don't know what makes it go out or what makes it, but I feel it stronger and stronger all the time. And so I'm very grateful to be able to offer it, and I'm grateful to you for being part of it. So go to brotherali.com, sign the mailing list if you haven't, join the caravan if you haven't, and get you a copy of this new album, Love and Service.
We talked initially at the podcast, we talked about a number of guests that we were really excited to have on.
Yeah.
And it was our assumption that that would be the driving force of our listenership. But from the jump, the very first episode is like 3 hours of you just telling the story of you.
Yeah.
And ever since then, it's been a regular occurrence for you to just turn the microphone on and start talking about something that's on your mind.
Yeah.
And I think it surprised both of us, especially last year when you did a series of, is it 6 episodes?
During
Ramadan?
Yeah, man. I not only did I talk by myself, like for 6 episodes, but I talked about Islam. Like I just basically talked about Islam for 12 hours. And there was not a real dip in the listenership at all. I will say there's growth in the Muslim community. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, we've had people, not saying those episodes were it, but I mean, I've had a number of people just like, hey, that, and people do reach out to me and become Muslim, and it really is like, my favorite thing to do is to talk about Islam. Like it's just my favorite thing, more than any other subject. Like I could talk about it all the time. So yeah, so when we did those episodes, that showed me a lot. You know what I mean? That people would just show up and hear me talk about something that's interesting to me. And I mean that it's one thing to do it for 1 or 2 episodes, but man, we did it all the way through the month of Ramadan, like one leading into Ramadan, and then all 4 weeks in Ramadan, and then one in the Eid episode. So yeah, 6 total 2-hour episodes with no drop off. It was like, oh man, you guys messed up. Like you're never getting another guest again. Like, you know how hard it is to try to get somebody to show up, and you know what I mean, to even schedule a time, and then we're working with 3 different time zones, So yeah, I mean that part has been really dope. Like being able to share like that, and for people for that being one of the things that people really, really, that draws certain people in. That feels really good. So much of I realize so much of what drives me is connecting and feeling understood.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, that's a really, there's a lot of that, to just be like, man, these people are really showing up. There's people that comment every week. There's certain people that if they don't comment, I'd be like, oh man, wonder. Shout out to Maya Chavez. I mean, it's never an episode. You know what I mean? It's funny because Maya will fall off for a couple weeks, and then you can tell oh man, she's back on it. And because you'll just see a comment on the last 4 episodes. I really like this about that, and it's dope. There's certain relationships that I have with people that, you have people that if you're in space with them, you really connect. But if you're not in the space with them, then you probably won't talk. And so I have that. There's a number of people that I've had that with that I haven't been able to get on the podcast yet. But I'm like, man, if I can have the kind of conversation, if I can just make it actually come together. So if I could talk to Ghostface the way that me and Ghostface have talked, that would be dope. Because again, you'll see a side of Ghostface that you don't see. If I could talk to Big Daddy Kane, you know what I mean? The way that me and him talk, right before the pandemic, we did a series of shows, festivals and stuff in Europe. And man, I went to his hotel room and we talked for 7 hours. It was just me and him and his tour manager. And I'm just like, dude, this is amazing. And then me and Yassine Bey talk for hours at a time. And I'm like, someday I'm just going to record this, and I'm just going to ask his forgiveness after. I'm just going to drop this stuff. But there's a lot of people that I'm like, man, it's the other thing about me that very well, one of my main, it's something that slows me up in general, is I don't want to ask people stuff, especially if I know that a lot of people ask them for things. And especially if they're more successful than me, I don't want to ask them, because I don't want to put that in the relationship. You know what I mean? So Posdnuos is another one. So generous. We have great conversations whenever we connect. It's not like we talk all the time, but I know that if I go to a thing that Posdnuos is at, and Dave was like this too, man, Rahimahullah, Dave from De La, and Mace too. Like, man, if I go somewhere and those guys are there, we're going to talk. We're going to really, really talk. And it's really going to be, something real. And, but it's just, I don't, I just have this thing where like, just that weirdness of the difference in between our level of success that I know a lot of times those people are hesitant to be friends with somebody less successful than them because there's always that question in the elephant in the room is like, you could help me. If you did something with me, it could help me. And honestly, they can't really. That's part of it. I know they actually can't. I know that it doesn't matter. Like Jay-Z could do an album with me next year and it's not going to turn me into anything. You know what I mean? It's not going to help. I know it doesn't actually help. But it does hold me back from asking people to be on my records or, I have to be super. So everybody that's been on the podcast almost are people that I'm really, really 100% comfortable with. For me, that's the thing that I would like to learn and the hurdle I would like to get over. You know what I mean? Like I really connected with Big Crit one time. But based on that conversation, I think he probably would, you know what I mean? Like if I start, I might be able to get him to have another one. And the number one person that's repelled by the difference in our in our success is Questlove. Every time I see Questlove, he's like, no, hungry, starving rapper that wants me to do something for him. Get away, get away, get away, get away. And then over the course of hanging out, something will happen that'll make him be like, oh yeah, no, he's just a music dude. That's right. Yeah, Ali, what's up, man? How you doing? Yeah, how come you never call me? Oh, come on, man. Get out of here. You know what I mean? Get out of here. How come we've never worked on anything? Because you don't want to. That's why. But yeah, all these people I've had cool interactions with. Hopefully we'll get them at some point. Hopefully I'll get out of my way a little bit and be able to do those.
We're at this milestone, having just put out 100th episode. It's the most obvious question, but I'd feel remiss if I didn't ask it. Do you have a favorite?
Not having gone back and listened to them. Ant. Yeah, Ant. That's a really important one for me for a lot of reasons. Because of who he is to me, how he is, the way that he was, the fact that he doesn't really do interviews, but also we did that one in person at his house. And he was really real with me. Like when I started, there's certain people I haven't asked because I just really don't think they like I've never asked Evidence and he just does not like talk. He doesn't like podcasts. He did a podcast for somebody one time. I won't say who, but they asked him about Eminem. They talked about his whole career. They asked him about Eminem, the fact that Everlast dissed Eminem on a Dilated record, and Eminem included them in his, if anybody says anything about anywhere in the internet about Eminem, he's going to find out and he's going to come back with his gun and everyone's going to cry. You know what I'm saying? Like everyone's dying. Mm-hmm. So he, stepped out of his comfort zone and sat with somebody and had a full conversation. And that became the kind of clickbait clip. And I know that really just made him feel like, man, forget all this. So I've never asked him just because I know how, and also I know him on a level that I don't know if he wants to show everybody. You know what I mean? Like Ev has been through it. And when I was with Freeway, I didn't ask him about his most painful stuff. Like I felt like, man, I'm not doing that. We turned off the camera. Remember with Chuck, did you stay on when we talked to Chuck?
For a while. And then it felt like I wasn't supposed to be there anymore.
Dude, the stuff that Chuck said after we stopped recording, that would have been the type of podcast that we're talking about. like if we wanted clickbait and tea and like that could have said that, we would be you know what I mean? We might be competing with everybody on that one. Cause I just asked Chuck some very frank questions and I was like, hey, is this? And he's like, man, I tell you, Ali, like he went into the whole, man, Chuck knows a lot about a lot of stuff. Yeah. And then there's certain places I just won't go with people, but like, I was close with Ev through some really personal things that aren't secrets, but
yeah,
it's like, man, if I talk about those things with Freeway or with Ev, it's just like, it's kind of similar to what Mystic was saying about what do we do with our trauma. Like,
Right.
there is a part of me too that's like, how much am I pimping my friendships with people?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's just all in the intention. It's just all gets back to trying to have the right intention. But there is that thing too, where because of the ways that I know people, I know that I can ask them about stuff. Like Bernie Mac used to say, I hate funerals. Funerals full of shit. They're gonna sit here and make you go cry on purpose. They're trying to make you cry on purpose. Like, I could probably make people cry on purpose if I wanted. You know what I mean? But I'm just not gonna ever do that.
Yeah, that Ant episode, for somebody who has really drawn his boundaries about how much of himself he wants to share publicly and who has done so little interviewing, I couldn't believe how open he showed up and how willing he was to really talk about things that hurt early in life, the ways that they've showed up throughout his career, and insecurities and mistakes, and and not at all in performative ways.
No.
There's things that he talked about that made me make big decisions in my own life. Like he helped me see things about myself through that one.
Wow.
Which is incredible to me.
And he's one of the main people that, like, he's got this outward persona, and it is him. And for a long time, it really was him. The leather jacket and the backwards Kango and the ponytail and a beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other, cussing. And, the little bit you got to see of him, like, that was it. And there was a period where that's a lot of who he was. But like anybody that knew him knew what was underneath that. And then he has done, of all the people that I know that have like healed and done therapy, and it's like him and my wife are the two people that I'm like, man, the person you are now compared to where, you know what I mean, is amazing. I don't know anybody that's worked harder on all of that stuff. And I think there's just not really a way for anybody to know that other than his friends. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that was really beautiful. I feel really grateful. And that's a case where I knew that I could talk to him and just kind of leave him space to see how far he wanted to go. And where I wouldn't be setting him up to talk about things that he didn't want to, or, just kind of like giving him the space to see how far he wanted to go. But it felt like he was ready to talk about it all, really, really dope.
Now contrast that with Slug, who's made a career about cracking open his rib cage and letting everything pour out. He shared something there that truly surprised me. Like, he got tender in a way that I wasn't prepared for after decades of watching him do it repeatedly and making a fine art out of it. When he talked about the effect that getting alopecia had on him.
Yeah.
And his relationship with being seen as a sex symbol.
Yes.
That was truly revelatory for me.
Yeah.
And I was not prepared for it.
Yeah. You know what? And it made me actually reflect on, you remember he did, like, when he had alopecia, they did the 7 shows at 7th Street.
Mm-hmm.
And me and you did one of them.
Right.
And he was wearing, at that time, he was wearing like different hats. Like, he would like have all these different hats he was wearing. And it's because he didn't necessarily feel good about like how he looked. And I just have this memory of like being on stage, and I came out, we did our songs together, and I pulled his hat off. And now I feel so bad about that. You know what I mean? Because I just didn't realize, like, you know what I mean?
Of course.
He's always had this facade of complete, for as emo as he could be, you know what I mean? When you're around him, he's such a, like, he is a leader. Like, I know that he goes, like, he's like, I'm not trying to lead anybody. And he doesn't necessarily impose that on anybody. But he's so focused on, he's so aware of his own purpose and like what he's here to do and what he's not here to do, and who he's here to be and who he's not here to. He's very clear on it.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And that's all you see when you're around him in that way. You know. Yeah, and with him, you know, there's moments that like I could have made him cry on purpose, and I didn't either. With him, you know what I mean. There's stuff that like I don't think he's really opened up about yet. That he just hasn't chosen to do that. So like kind of like cracked the door a little bit, and he didn't really want to go there, and it's just like, all right, yeah, we're not doing that. But yeah, I hadn't thought about that in this sense either. But then also the other part of that is that he always had I don't know if an insecurity but he always had something to prove with him being an actual songwriter and rapper.
Yeah.
He's like, how much of this is just me is just me looking good? You know what I mean? I Atmosphere is a group that is one of the most important bands. You know what I mean? I just really, you talk about people not getting their flowers. I could cry thinking about it. They have not gotten a fraction of what they deserve in the way of just like what they've inspired, who they've inspired, what they've done, just their output, like the amount of amazing music that these men have made in the last 30 years. Like, yeah, I just feel like for as successful as those guys are, there's so much that I would love for the world to really be able to see about them. And I could do 100 more with each one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that Slug lives a long life, but if Slug were to pass away, I remember all the stuff that came out about Prince when Prince died. It was like, oh, people didn't know all this stuff Prince was doing. The things that people would probably finally find it in themselves to say about that man, you know what I mean? And it's not just well-known people that he thought would be powerful and influential, you know what I mean? Like, I just remembered a story about when we got off tour, and I just happened to mention like, he knew that we were struggling, like we didn't make any money on tour. And I just remember a story where he just came by your crib and was just like, hey, I think you dropped this.
He gave me a pack of cigarettes, and I just looked at it, wondering what was happening. And then he drove off before I opened it.
You
and
never
found
smoked
that it was
cigarettes,
just
yeah.
packed with $50 bills. I had lost my job. Going on that tour with you
that's
all
right. That's
led
what it
to me
was.
losing my job.
That's right. That's what it was.
And so when I got home, he called me and he's like, hey, you forgot something. And he swung by, and he didn't have any interest in seeing me open it and thank him for it and tell him how much it meant. He just knew that I needed it, so he came through and dropped it off.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So that, I feel really good about those, like any time where I can talk to people in a way that I know they don't get a chance to, that the world doesn't really get to experience them in that particular way. I didn't get there the way that I wanted to with Immortal Technique. You know what I mean? Because it's just so hard. Like, he's just way too good at being Immortal Technique. You know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong. Like, and that is who he is. That's an authentic projection of one side of him. But I was really hoping, and I feel like sometimes, like, because I wasn't in the room, I feel like maybe if I was in the room, I could have got a little bit more Felipe.
I think you just named the single biggest challenge that this podcast has in more than one way. It's like, we're hitting record. You have 2 hours to capture some magic.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier, especially for you, I think, just knowing you and having shared space with you so much for so long. Like, you really bring energy into a room. But when you're halfway around the world and we're relying on technology, that can all by itself be a struggle. But then on top of that, a lot of times we run into lag issues.
Yeah.
Where the natural rhythm of the conversation,
yes.
which is where so much of the energy builds. That's like fanning the embers and building up the flame.
Yes.
It's just not available because there's this like stilted rhythm to the conversation. And
I mean, and that's, yeah, man, that's the the main antagonist of this show is the technical problems of me being in Uskudar. Like, man, it is an ongoing, like, I don't necessarily call it a nightmare, but I mean, it's a major problem. Both the time difference, I mean, that's another one of the big things. Also, like, I book this show myself, which is, I mean, that's a whole job. Like, that's a whole, it's one thing for Joe Rogan to say that. Joe Rogan is like, yeah, I booked this whole show just text in my text messages. And like, yeah, like once you're Joe Rogan, like everybody wants to do your show. And I know he came up doing that. But it's like, man, it takes a lot, cuz I'm a rapper dealing with other rappers for the most part. You know what I mean? So somebody says yes. Getting a rapper to actually follow through on something that they said they would do is one of the most difficult things for anybody in the world to do. I feel like, man, I try to never leave people hanging anymore. Now that I've been on the other side of like trying to get a rapper to do something that they in theory want to do. You know what I'm saying? I know a bunch of people have been like, hey, will you rap on this? And I hear it and I'm like, yeah, I'll rap on that. You know what I mean? Man, I feel so bad. Speech from Arrested Development came through and did the show.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the biggest, like we had a really bad lag. And I actually was at Darian's crib in Brooklyn. So our friend Darian that worked at Rhymesayers, or still works at Rhymesayers, but he's worked there for a long time. One of my really great friends at Rhymesayers, moved out to Brooklyn, and we got a chance to interview Speech from Arrested Development. And Darian was actually he wasn't even in New York. And so I just went and showed up at his crib, and his roommate was like, hey, yeah, here's where his setup is, because he has a podcast set up. So we did that, had a great conversation with Speech, terrible lag all the way through it. And then right away, Speech sent me a song, and I was on tour and everything, and I forgot until the album came out. And the new Arrested Development album is really dope. The song came out really fresh. Just like, damn, man. And he didn't hound me. He just asked me once. I said, yes, I never did it. He never circled back. It's like, damn, man, I messed that one up.
Mm.
But yeah, between the amount of time, and I can't just call people, because most people would be like, yeah, here's my phone number, just call me. And there's not a cell phone carrier in the country of Turkey that will let you just call America. Like you got to use an app. You know what I mean? You can't just call and text and whatever else. Like you pretty much have to use an app. So I'm like, yeah, you download WhatsApp or Telegram or something like that. And then once we finally get on with people, man, just the lag, and then also the unpredictability of Istanbul. That just like, man, you just come in one day and the power is just out in your whole building and you don't know why. Or the Wi-Fi is out and there's no, you know what I mean? There's no reason for it, or there's just a random chain on the door. Like the main door for the office building is just chained up, and they're like, yeah, it's a holiday. Nobody works on a holiday. We're like, man, my computer's in there. You know what I mean? Like the stuff we learned, especially in the first year, you know what I mean? Is this a trip?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really telling, circling back to just the magic of sharing space. You played a series of shows in Philadelphia last year. And while you were there, you recorded, I think, 3 episodes.
Yeah.
All of them in person.
Yeah.
With Tone Trump, Freeway, and Rami Youssef.
Yeah.
And those are 3 of my favorites. And I mean, you could just feel the difference of 2 people sharing space and feeling that in-person connection.
Yeah. And that's the thing where I'm like, man, if we took this thing to it just comes down to resources. Like if we were to take this podcast to whatever, Luminary, Spotify, whatever, and get some money and like get a budget to be able to do it, then I probably could. We probably have a booker. We probably have, the budget to be able to go and like travel to America for a week or 2 at a time. And like just the way that I go to America for a couple weeks to do shows, go to America and just knock out a bunch of podcast episodes. It's one of the things that I think about from time to time, but I don't know. After fighting so hard to control our own situation and own our stuff, it's like I can't see ever going back on that. You know what I mean? And unless it's something huge, it'd have to be something really big. Are there so what are we don't really talk about this too much, but like what are your goals for the podcast?
I mean, like a lot of the projects that I get involved in, my favorite position to be in life is helping somebody who I really believe in and who I really think has excellence at the thing that they're doing. I love being in a position to help them contextualize it, to help them edit it, to help them get out of their own way,
Mm-hmm.
and to help present it to the world in what I view to be the very best possible form.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've said, I think even elsewhere in this episode, I really love the style of conversations that you're having, what you're bringing out of the people that you invite onto this show, and the people themselves that you're giving a platform to through this show. And it took us a little while for us to find the editing style that really suited this show while also honoring your vision, your original vision for the show. But starting around, I think the Merce episodes are where I really view the turning point. I've really found a place with this show where I feel comfortable giving it lots of space to breathe, letting it feel really natural and move at its own pace, but to really dig my fingers into it and move things around and cut things up and trim things away to serve what you're trying to communicate and what your guest is trying to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's lots of things in life that I'm good at. I think that editing, and I don't just mean audio editing, in a broad sense.
Yeah.
Being an editor is the thing that I think I'm truly great at.
Yes. I mean, you're an amazing cook too. Like I think you're great at a lot of things, but I could see that being the star of the show.
Yeah. I mean, cooking is, in a lot of ways, just good editing too.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be curious to see what happens with Travelers Media in the next year, because from the beginning, you and I, this one relationship, this one set of conversations, we've been really clear about all the different things that we're trying to do with this platform.
Mm-hmm.
But from an outsider's perspective, I think it's really looked like, what is Travelers Media? It's a podcast.
Right.
It's a business for this podcast.
Yeah.
Travelers Media, to me, is an evolution of your career.
Mm-hmm.
The podcast was us finding a whole new way for you to communicate, and the things that are in the works here at Travelers Media are going to explode that, And so I'm really excited to see you get to communicate, you get to share your story, you get to amplify the stories of the people that you love and share community with. You getting to start conversations and push listeners and community members to think about new things or think about old things in new ways, in just a number of different formats, a number of different styles of communication. That makes me feel really excited.
Mm-hmm.
And, making the shift here in terms of our focus is like a two-man operation, from primarily podcast forward to rolling out this new album and this new film and the things that we have lined up coming after it. It's really exciting to me. It gives me a lot of energy and enthusiasm and pride to have any role to play in helping to present these things to the world.
That feels like and I gotta go.
Well, we are at about that time.
Yeah. Special thanks to my man BK1. I mean, not only for being on this particular episode, but I mean, he's produced all of the episodes. He's been here from day one, and we're genuinely partners in this work. And we have been from day one of my career, literally. Like, this is the first guy to play me on the radio. This is the first guy to, help me learn how to record my voice. Go and listen to those episodes with BK if you haven't yet. They came out last June. And it's just really beautiful to be on this journey together. And you and your support are a big part of that. So make sure to like and share and subscribe. All that really matters. If you see us post stuff on social media, save it, comment on it, send it to somebody, like it, all of that stuff. It all really helps. And then also doing things like signing the mailing list on brotherali.com. The caravan is there. The caravan is a really beautiful, like, special way of heightening the connection between us. Shout out to all of the people in the caravan on all the different levels. There's all kind of unreleased music there that you can check out, and videos and, talks, and there's oral history there. You can hear some embarrassing radio commercials I did before Shadows on the Sun came out. That's part of actually how we funded Shadows on the Sun. So there's a lot of stuff there, that if you're part of this thing, it would be really dope for you to have access to all of that and to go in there and really dive in. So go to brotherali.com for all of that. Make sure to head to Zakat Foundation, trying to send meals to Gaza. And especially during Ramadan, it's a big deal. We love you. We appreciate you all. Shout out to everybody that's supportive of this podcast. And this is just the beginning. So we're grateful that you're here with us. We love you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.